What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Gsluke here with a Monday Night Football preview for the game between the Chargers and the Colts. Going to break down some of the game scripts you might want to keep in mind for playing Showdown and some of the props I'm playing over on the Prize Picks side. And either way, you'll be equipped with some of the information that you need to go out there, either put together some lineups on the Showdown side or some slips over there on Prize Picks. So a lot to talk about here. Let's go ahead and get this thing rocking. We're going to begin with a look at the Showdown slate, where instead of going player by player, we're just going to talk about some of the things in general you need to consider for tonight, because we could go, player by player talking about some of these projections, but Showdown at the end of the day is all about game theory, all about ownership, game scripts, and trying to correlate the sort of lineup that you're playing. So that's what we're going to focus on here. Of course, throughout the process, we will be touching on individual player projections, but the far more important part is the holistic process for going through and making your lineup. So let's start off with the game total, what Vegas expects this game to play out like, which is about an average total right there in the mid 40s. It's in a dome, in a stadium over there in Indianapolis. So no wintry effects to worry about like we've seen over this last weekend or so. But more importantly, an offense on one side that has a lot of volume and extremely high-paced offense in the Chargers, going against a team with two backups at both of the major skill positions. So you're talking about Nick Foles playing quarterback for the Colts, and then Jonathan Taylor, of course, out for the rest of the year. He was placed on injured reserve last week. So you're dealing with a team with a completely different identity. Nick Foles, a similar style quarterback to a Matt Ryan, but clearly going to be things that change from one system to the other. And then at running back, you've got Zach Moss and Deion Jackson, who are going to be filling in that huge, massive role that Jonathan Taylor leaves behind. So there's a lot of moving parts here, and your chalk tonight, which is what I think we should focus on first here, is going to be on the Chargers. I mean, that's self-evident. It's self-explanatory. They have by far the more consistent offense. They have by far the more productive offense out of the two. I don't think you could argue otherwise there, and a lot less question marks. So in Austin Eckler, you can see 44% out, nearly 20% at captain. Justin Herbert, nearly 60% at the flex spot, 20% at the captain spot. They're going to far outpace their respective partners on the Colts side. I mean, look at this. Nick Foles, nearly half is owned. You can see 4 times less owned at captain than somebody like a Herbert. Even Michael Pittman, right? He's 41% owned, 12% at the captain slot, but still significantly less exposure going to the Colts' number one threat as opposed to over here on the Charger side, right? Almost 1.5 times the ownership at captain, a little bit more at the flex spot. And that effect is only even more evident the further and further we go down this board. Deion Jackson, only 18% at flex. See Zach Moss, a little bit higher ownership there because he's expected to get a few more carries tonight, and I definitely agree with that. But we'll talk about Deion Jackson. You can see I have him down at the captain slot. A lot of that comes down to his receiving usage, right? So when we go through these game scripts, we'll be able to talk about why I like him a little bit more than Zach Moss there. But, just in terms of your general chalk, which is what I want to touch on here, it's all going to be on the Charger side. So not really a lot of surprises when it comes to that end. You do have Kyle Granson, who's out for the Colts. So you have a lot of people getting to a Jelani Woods, also a few getting to Mo Alley Cox at the bare minimum of $200. That would kind of wrap up your chalk down low. Alec Pierce getting quite a bit of exposure there, nearly 25% at the flex spot. And then your kickers getting right about what they're used to on any certain slate. So we know the Chargers are going to be the favored team, the team that a lot of people are getting to, which I don't necessarily disagree with. So I am going to have stacks where I have an Eckler at captain, Keenan Allen at captain, that sort of thing. But I'm going to be mixing in perhaps some of the lower owned options on the Colts, right? So let's talk through some of the game scripts. If we agree with the Vegas script, popular sentiment out there that the Chargers win tonight on the road, how can we differentiate ourselves? If we're expecting them to be ahead to score most of the points tonight, that's going to put the Colts in a pass-first mode. That means that players like a Zach Moss, for example, might not get quite as many carries as we're expecting. If they're playing from behind, they're going to be in that pass-heavy mode. Zach Moss, not nearly as good of a blocker as a Deion Jackson, and certainly not as good at catching the ball out of the backfield as a Deion Jackson, who's had games of over 10 catches this year, 5-6 targets out of the backfield, most of those coming without Jonathan Taylor being active, which is, again, once again the case again here tonight. So Zach Moss, nearly 30%. In that sort of script, I'd be fading him hard. Right now, if I'm expecting the Colts to win tonight, to be playing from ahead, they're going to be running the ball a lot more. He's going to be getting, 15 to 20 of those rushes that Jonathan Taylor typically would, and that would make him one of my favorite plays on the slate. So when we're thinking about a game script, when we're trying to put together a player pool, we really have to consider, the score. What team's going to be playing from ahead? What team are we expecting to be playing from behind? And that's going to help you make this decision at running back. So for me, I'm expecting the Chargers to roll. I'm agreeing with that Vegas line, that sentiment out there. So I'm getting to a lot of Deion Jackson, right? But on the flip side, I talked about what we can do there. A few other players you could take, a Jelani Woods. He's shown an ability to go out there, post a 10-catch game, which he, posted 9 catches against the Steelers early November there, about 4 or 5 weeks ago. Was able to accomplish that feat. These sort of players are how you can differentiate a Chargers first lineup, right? You could start with an Eckler at captain, take a Justin Herbert as one of your flex spots, mix in somebody like a Keenan Allen or a Mike Williams, and take 1 or 2 of those pivots that I just talked about, and perhaps at least get closer to a unique lineup, right? If you're taking all this chalk up top, it's not like he's completely unowned, right? 18% on a Deion Jackson. Down here with the Jelani Woods, right? He's 18% owned himself. But if you leave a little bit of salary on the table, perhaps take one true pivot out there, right? Mixing in somebody like a Donald Parham, a Jordan Wilkins as a complete flyer pick, and you're well on your way to having a unique lineup, even some of those large field GPPs. So that's the idea there. Let's talk about a few other game scripts. The obvious one would be an Indianapolis win, right? If you're expecting them to go out there at home to bounce the Chargers, which they've choked over the last few years, the last 2-3 weeks of the season. So it has happened before. So I don't think it's without precedent out there. Then yeah, get to a Zach Moss, right? Get to potentially Zach Moss at captain. That's when I'd be considering a Michael Pittman Jr. even more than I already am. Now, Michael Pittman Jr., I think he gets plenty of usage, plenty of volume in this offense, even in losing game scripts. So even in a lineup where I'm maybe taking 4 Chargers and only 2 Colts players, I'm not afraid to use a Michael Pittman at captain. But if I'm taking an Indy first line, really expected them to go out there and kick some ass tonight, he's going to be even more attractive to me. Mike Williams, I'm okay with him tonight. I think he's a little bit expensive. Same thing with Keenan Allen, right? $9,800. Just $8,200 for Michael Pittman Jr. is so much easier to fit into lineups and doesn't project all too much differently than those two. In fact, you can see he's projected for more points than a Mike Williams and only 1.2 points less than a Keenan Allen there. So I just think you really have to consider a price tag in this mid-tier range. But I'm okay with both quarterbacks. Nick Foles at $9,000. I think it's an adequate price tag, about where it should be. I don't think he's cheap. I don't think he's too expensive there, so he'll definitely be in my player pool. But where you're going to win the slate here, guys, is this mid-tier range. Getting to a Joshua Palmer, who I've absolutely loved the usage over the last month or so. A Paris Campbell, who's flashed a lot of upside. He's had a few 7-8 target games, and if he can do so at $5,400, he's going to pay off that price tag. A Gerald Everett, right? He's 22% owned, so he's not being overlooked there, but he's somebody who I wouldn't be surprised at all to see go off. Just when you're playing 20 lineups or 150 lineups, like I am on this sort of slate, these are the type of plays that I try to get over the field on. These 4 or 5K options that I think have a chance to get into the optimal, which both kickers and this sort of script I could see getting there. A lot of those mid-tier wide receiving options that we talked about, I could see getting there. And Alec Woods, Jelani Woods, all fit that sort of description. The players that I'm avoiding, defenses, right? Defenses in this sort of script, they're going to need a defensive touchdown, which it doesn't happen all that often. It can happen. It's just probably not going to happen. So I'll be fading those 2 defenses. A Josh Kelly, now I have him projected for nearly 7 fantasy points, but I don't see him posting like 15 to 20 tonight. So he's going to be a fade. Let's see, Ashton Dulin with all those healthy wide receivers. I'm not sure how much he's going to play. DeAndre Carter, same thing. You have Williams, Allen, and Palmer ahead of him on the depth chart. So I just want to make sure that the value picks that I'm getting to are actually going to see the field. So, if we're going to take a shot on one of these guys, let's make sure they're playing at least 25, ideally something like 50, 60% of the snaps, like you're going to get with an Alec Pierce or somebody up here like Josh Palmer or Paris Campbell. So that's the idea on the Showdown slate. Let's go ahead now and hop into the prize picks. All right, what we're going to do here now is go through 4 of the props that I'm playing for tonight's slate. It's not all the props I'm playing upwards of 9 of them tonight. So much like the Showdown projections, which will change throughout the day, we'll get updated ownership. The player pool usually changes at least a little bit throughout the day. Sometimes it stays relatively consistent, but when ownership changes one way or the other, there will be a lot of updates. Much like a lot of that can be found on my Patreon, the rest of my props I'm taking will be found there too. But just to give you an idea of what we're playing, let's start with the Deion Jackson prop, which is arguably my favorite on the entire slate. They have him at 9.5 receiving yards. And if you look at last game, when they played against the Vikings, they were ahead the entire game. He had 0 targets, 0 catches last week, which is why we're getting the hanging carrot out there at 9.5 receiving yards. If you take a look at some of his stints early in the year, I talked about it a little bit before, a 10 catch game, 5-6 target games. He's by far the better receiving back out of the two on the team. Zach Moss is more of a bruiser, bigger back that's going to run up the middle, give you plenty of rushes and a lot of touches that way. Deion Jackson going to do so a little bit more so throughout the year. So 9.5 receiving yards, especially with the script that I'm expecting to play out, which is the Chargers going out there and kicking some ass tonight. That's going to be really leading me to a Deion Jackson. So 9.5 receiving yards. I have him projected for closer to 24 receiving yards, making it, again, my favorite prop on the entire slate. The next prop I'm getting to is Eckler under 5 receptions. At most sports books, his prop is at 4.5. So obviously on Prize Picks, a little bit higher there. And though on the books where it's at 4.5, it's slightly juiced towards the over. It's like -125 to -135 was the range that I was looking at the last time I checked. The under is something like, I think it was like +110, +120 or something like that. So well within its range of outcomes, and that's at 4.5. Now that we consider we can get him at 5, a lot of that push equity, a lot of that over equity that was baked into that -135 line for the over is only going to push for us now. He has to get to 6, 7, 8 receptions to end up hitting the over here, which is why I'm so comfortable getting to the under. Like I mentioned, there was already about a 40-45% implied odds of him going under 4.5, let alone the push equity that we now get at the 5 reception mark. So another prop that I definitely feel good about taking here. Next up, we've got a tackles prop, which is actually for Drew Tranquill for the Los Angeles Chargers. And what I'm thinking about here is just looking at the game logs. You look at a 14-game sample size. He has covered in 10 of the 14 games. So it's pretty straightforward here. A lot of the Chargers fans that I'm friends with have told me that he's an extremely explosive, fast player, loves running all over the field, making hustle plays. And that's what I like to hear from when I'm going out there for one of these tackle props, right? Somebody that's eager to go out there and make these tackles, not somebody that's just going to have them fed to them. So I like Tranquill. I like the track record that he's shown throughout the year here, and I'll definitely be getting to him. The last prop we're taking is another tackles prop. It's Zaire Franklin, another player who's gone 10 for 14 on covering this prop this year. And in fact, Franklin's actually burned me before. I took his under against the Titans when they had him at 10.5 tackles. Frankly, I thought it was a mistake. He was a rookie. He was new to the scene. I thought 10.5 tackles for anybody was crazy. Little did I know that, first off, Zaire Franklin, we know this now, after 14 weeks, might win Defensive Player of the Year in terms of being a rookie, and is one of the better tackling players in all of the NFL. That game when I went against him at 10.5 tackles, he posted 15 tackles easily, most of them in the first half. He covered that line through the first 2 quarters. So I've learned my lesson on Franklin. The kid is an absolute stud. And again, if we're expecting the Chargers to go out there and dominate this game, that means that they're going to have the ball a little bit more. They should dominate the time of possession, which is only going to give Franklin even more opportunities to go out there and make some tackles. But that's all I've got for Prize Picks. Again, at least here for the video. If you want all of the props that I'm taking, they are on the Patreon page. But in terms of these 4, I have played them in a 4-leg power play together, but mostly looking at 2- and 3-leg cards. If you're on the Patreon, if you've been following my channel here for a while, that's what I always recommend going with. They're smaller cards, usually flexes if you can. Going after the 4-leg power is nice, right, to get that little 10x payout. But if you're truly looking to grind out ROI, I am always going to recommend the smaller and more conservative cards, at least if you're running with a good hit rate. Right? If you're running with 55 to 60% hit rates, ideally something like 60 to 65% at the very least, if you really know what you're doing when it comes to Prize Picks, that's going to be an absolute ATM for you. You're going to have up and down swings if you decide to be a little bit more aggressive about it and go with the power play approach, which I usually tend to try and talk people out of, because sure, if you look at the pure metrics from the long-term perspective, it can be a little bit higher potential. It has a slightly higher ROI, but a lot of us are a little bit emotional when it comes to our betting, and we want to get a little bit of money back, right? We want to slowly but surely build up that bankroll. To me, having that ease of mind is worth, let's say, the 1 to maybe 2% edge that you're losing long term. So that's what I like to say. Hey, if you want to go big or go home, by all means, play a bunch of power plays out there, right? But you got to be willing to take the downswings if you're doing that, right? When you go out there, go 3 for 4 on a slip and get nothing to show for it. You got to be okay with that, right? That's the trade-off there. But I'll start rambling there. That's all we got for Prize Picks, and yeah. All right, fellas, that is all I've got here for the Monday Night Football preview. It's been a little while since I've done a video, so probably a little bit rusty there, but we'll get back to it. We got golf coming for the spring here. I believe it's the first week of January, first tournament back, Tournament of Champions. So looking forward to that. And then some Showdown content to come. Took a little bit of time away to spend time with family over the holidays, that sort of thing. Get some R&R before recharging here for 2023. But really excited to bring you guys some content, and hopefully so we can go out there and win some GPPs. Over the last month, it's been one of the more profitable months I've had on Prize Picks, really building up the bankroll on that side. But also on Draftkings, we had a few takedowns in the community. So I know I've taken a little bit of time away from the content side, but projections, all of that in the community have still been fire since then. But really just looking forward to building this brand here in 2023, building that community so we can keep giving out those winners. But until then, guys, like I said, best of luck, whether you're on Prize Picks or for Showdown tonight. Make sure you like the video before you get on out of here. And if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, well, first off, what are you waiting for? But make sure you do so you don't miss any of that content to come. Best of luck, and I'll catch you guys next time.